If you've ever found yourself confused by a man who pulls you close one moment and disappears the next, stay with me, because what I'm about to tell you will change the way you understand him and the way you understand love. When an avoidant pulls away, most people immediately assume it means they don't care, but the truth is almost the opposite, and understanding this will completely change how you see their behavior, because their distance is rarely a sign of rejection, and far more often a sign of fear, the kind that gets triggered when emotions start to mean something real, something they can no longer control or keep at a safe distance the way they're used to. Avoidants grow up believing that closeness is risky, that relying on someone leads to pain or disappointment. So when they meet a person who awakens genuine feelings, their first instinct isn't to move toward the warmth of the connection, but to retreat from it in order to protect themselves from a level of vulnerability they haven't learned to feel safe in. This fear can be so strong that the love they feel becomes the very reason they distance themselves, because in their mind, feeling deeply is dangerous. It means opening the door to being hurt, and they would rather pull back than let those emotions flood them all at once. You might notice this in moments when things start going well, when the connection feels closer, when you start seeing a softer side of them. Right when you think they're letting you in, they suddenly create space, go quiet, or seem emotionally far away. And while that feels personal, it's really just a protective reflex, like their nervous system is saying, this is too much too fast, so they step back to regain control over their feelings. For an avoidant, distance is not a rejection of you, but a way to manage their internal state, a way to slow down the intensity that love brings, because intensity to them feels like danger, even if you're offering nothing but warmth. Many avoidants learned early in life that needing someone leads to disappointment, so as adults, when they finally meet someone they genuinely want, their old wiring tells them that this person could also hurt them, not because you will, but because their emotional history conditioned them to expect it, so they protect themselves by retreating before they get too attached. What makes this confusing for the person on the receiving end is that the avoidant often doesn't communicate this fear. They don't know how to say, I care about you so much it scares me, so instead they act cold or withdrawn. But underneath that withdrawal is actually an emotional hurricane they're trying to keep from spilling out. If you look closely, you'll see that they pull away most when the bond gets real, not when it's weak, because the closer they feel to you, the more exposed they become. And for someone who equates vulnerability with danger, love feels like standing on the edge of a cliff with no railing. Their fear doesn't mean they don't value the connection. It means they value it so much they don't trust themselves to navigate the emotional weight of it without losing the sense of control they've relied on all their life. So when an avoidant steps back, it's not indifference but self-protection, and while it feels like distance to you, to them it's breathing space, a moment to regulate the emotions that feel overwhelming. And what's important to understand is that if they didn't care, they wouldn't need that space, because nothing about the connection would stir anything deep within them, nothing would activate those old wounds, nothing would threaten their emotional defenses, and the fact that you do trigger those reactions means you've reached a place inside them that very few people ever get close to, a place where love and fear collide in a way they're still learning to handle. When an avoidant becomes inconsistent, most people take it as a sign that they're losing interest, but what's actually happening is that their emotional system is hitting a level of intensity they don't know how to manage, and they retreat not because the connection is weak, but because it's strong enough to overwhelm them in ways they can't articulate. Avoidants are wired to stay in control of their feelings, so when someone comes into their life and triggers real emotion, fear, desire, attachment, vulnerability, that internal control starts slipping, and instead of leaning in, they instinctively pull back to restore the emotional order they understand. Their inconsistency isn't a game or manipulation, it's a survival mechanism learned from years of believing that closeness equals danger, and that too much emotional exposure is a threat they have to shut down before it consumes them. You'll notice that they're present and warm one moment, almost like they're letting you see the real version of themselves, and then suddenly they go quiet, distant, or emotionally unavailable. And this back and forth isn't because they've changed their mind about you, but because they're experiencing a wave of feelings that's too big for them to sit with. The moments when they seem close are moments when their guard slips, when your presence makes them feel safe enough to let emotion in. But as soon as they notice how open they've become, fear kicks in and they retreat to rebuild the emotional walls that have protected them for years. To them, closeness is not just intimacy, it's exposure, vulnerability, and the possibility of being hurt. So when they get overwhelmed, they don't know how to communicate that they're scared or overstimulated. They just disappear into silence, because silence is where they feel in control again. Their inconsistency is a reflection of two competing realities inside them: the part that wants love, connection, and closeness, and the part that fears losing autonomy, getting rejected, or being seen too deeply. And these two forces pull them in opposite directions, creating behavior that looks confusing from the outside, but feels like emotional whiplash on the inside. When emotions rise, avoidants often feel physically and mentally overloaded, almost like their system is getting too many signals at once, and instead of processing it through conversation or vulnerability, they regulate by withdrawing, because distance gives them a chance to decompress and return to what feels familiar. People sometimes misread this withdrawal as them not caring, but if they felt nothing, they wouldn't need to manage their emotions at all. They wouldn't go through an internal struggle. They wouldn't oscillate between closeness and space. And the inconsistency you're seeing is actually evidence that their feelings are real enough to unsettle their emotional equilibrium. What makes this even more complicated is that avoidants often feel ashamed of their emotional reactions. So when they retreat, they also fear disappointing you, which creates even more internal pressure. And rather than explaining themselves, they retreat deeper because they don't want you to see them in that conflicted state. Their inconsistency is not a measure of your worth or the value of the connection. It's a reflection of how powerful the connection is to them, how much it touches parts of them they've spent a lifetime protecting, and the internal conflict they feel between wanting to be close to you and wanting to stay safe within themselves. So when they pull back, it's not a sign they don't feel anything. It's a sign that they feel so much they don't yet know how to stay present inside those emotions without getting overwhelmed. And that emotional overload is what creates the pattern you see as inconsistency. When an avoidant truly cares about someone, their love rarely arrives in loud, dramatic gestures, and instead shows up in small, subtle actions that most people overlook, which is why so many partners misunderstand the depth of their feelings, because avoidants express love in ways that feel safe to them rather than in ways that look obvious to others. They might not say, "I miss you," or "I've been thinking about you," but they'll show it in the details they remember, the things they quietly do, and the moments they show up when you least expect it. And these gestures, though gentle and understated, often carry far more sincerity than the grand expressions people usually chase. An avoidant will often demonstrate love through practical care, sending you something that reminded them of a conversation, doing small favors that make your day easier, checking in without announcing that it's because they care, or subtly adjusting their routine to make space for you, because these actions allow them to express closeness without crossing the emotional lines that make them feel exposed. They pay attention in ways that surprise you, remembering stories, preferences, fears, and moments you didn't even realize mattered to them, because listening from a distance feels safe, and showing you they listened feels even safer. They may not initiate deep emotional conversations, but they'll be the person who notices when something's off in your tone or when you're not yourself. And even if they don't say it directly, they'll respond with quiet acts of support, maybe checking in later, offering help in a subtle way, or giving you space while still letting you know they're there. Avoidants often love through presence rather than words, showing showing up in the moments when you actually need them, not the moments when performance would look romantic, because to them, love isn't about declarations, but about consistency in the little things they feel comfortable giving. You'll see it when they send you something random that proves they've been thinking of you, or when they remember something you said once and bring it up at the perfect moment, or when they reach out in their own soft way after disappearing, not because they want attention, but because their feelings for you never stopped simmering beneath the surface. These subtle gestures may appear small, but for an avoidant, they're enormous steps, each one requiring emotional courage and a willingness to risk being seen a little more than they're used to. The reason these actions matter so much is because avoidants do not perform affection for recognition. They don't do things to impress or convince you. They do them because something in them genuinely wants to care for you in the only way they feel emotionally safe. Their love isn't loud because loud feels dangerous, but quiet feels real. And the more you pay attention to the understated ways they express care, the more you realize that their small gestures add up to something profound. When they send a thoughtful message, check up on you after a hard day, remember something you were worried about, or show up in their discreet, gentle way, those are all signs that their heart is invested, even if they don't have the emotional language to say it. An avoidant's subtle actions are meaningful precisely because they're not given lightly. They're given because something about you broke through their emotional defenses enough to make them act on feelings they normally keep hidden. And when you understand how significant those small gestures are to someone who guards their vulnerability, you begin to see just how deeply they actually love. When an avoidant begins to open up emotionally, even in the smallest ways, it's not because vulnerability comes naturally to them, but because something in them feels safe enough to take a risk. And this process of opening happens slowly, in carefully measured doses, because every step toward emotional closeness challenges the protective system they've spent years building to survive disappointment, betrayal, or emotional neglect. For an avoidant, vulnerability is not just uncomfortable. It feels dangerous, like stepping into a room with no exits. So when they share a personal story, admit a fear, express affection, or allow you to see a side of them they usually hide, each moment is a calculated leap that costs them emotional energy and courage. They don't open up all at once because doing so would overwhelm them, and overwhelm is the very state they've spent their whole life avoiding. So instead, they reveal themselves slowly, testing the water, watching your reactions, making sure that every piece of themselves they offer won't be used against them or lead to rejection, which they fear more deeply than they admit. You might notice that their vulnerability appears in unexpected moments, like when they're relaxed or when the conversation feels safe and unpressured, and then just as quickly they may pull back or redirect, not because their feelings changed, but because the openness made them feel exposed and they need a moment to regain their emotional footing. To them, emotional intimacy is like walking a tightrope where every step forward feels both meaningful and risky. And even though they want to be close to you, they don't yet trust closeness enough to stay open for long periods of time, so they open and close in a rhythm that makes sense to their nervous system, even if it looks confusing from the outside. When they share something real, whether it's a past hurt, a personal insecurity, a vulnerable thought, or an honest confession, it means they've crossed an internal line that they rarely cross for anyone. And this is why those small glimpses into their inner world are so important, because avoidants don't give them casually. They reveal themselves to people who feel emotionally safe, and if they're giving you pieces of their truth, even slowly, it's because you've become someone they trust enough to take the risk of being seen. This slow pace doesn't mean their feelings are weak, it means their feelings are strong enough that they want to protect them, and avoidants protect what they value by moving carefully, not recklessly. Sometimes after opening up they may retreat, and instead of seeing that retreat as rejection, it's important to understand that they're simply regulating the emotional intensity they just experienced, because vulnerability for them is like an adrenaline surge. Powerful, overwhelming, and in need of recovery time. They might come back later with a small gesture, a check-in, or a quiet presence, which is their way of saying they still care, even if they can't stay emotionally exposed for long. Every piece of vulnerability they share is a step forward, even if followed by a step back, and the pattern itself is evidence of their internal conflict between longing for closeness and fearing it at the same time. Their slow unfolding is their love language, a quiet sign that they feel something real, because avoidants don't let just anyone into their inner world, and when they let you in even a little, it means you've reached them in a place they swore they'd never open again. When someone with avoidant tendencies starts to truly feel something for you, their entire emotional system gets disrupted, because avoidants survive by staying in a numb zone where nothing affects them too deeply, nothing pulls them too close, and nothing threatens their sense of control. So the moment you begin to matter to them, you unintentionally break the emotional balance they've relied on for years, and this disruption is exactly why they pull back even when the connection is getting stronger. Avoidants don't fear you as a person, they fear the feelings you awaken in them, feelings they've spent much of their life trying not to feel, because emotions for them are not gentle or manageable. They come in intense waves that feel unpredictable, overwhelming, and hard to regulate. So when you enter their life and stir up these deep emotions, it shakes the internal numbness they've used to protect themselves from attachment. Suddenly, they catch themselves thinking about you more than they want to, caring about your opinion, missing you when you're not around, or feeling affected by your mood. And each one of these reactions alarms them, because it means they're no longer emotionally detached, and losing that detachment makes them feel exposed, unsure, and vulnerable in ways they don't know how to handle. This is why avoidants often create distance right after moments of emotional closeness. Your presence has touched a part of them they didn't expect anyone to reach, and the closeness feels both comforting and terrifying, like stepping into warmth they crave, but fear they won't be able to manage. The avoidant's natural response is to retreat so they can recover the sense of emotional control they lost, because for them, control is safety, and feeling too much too quickly feels like losing themselves, so they step back, not to punish you, but to steady themselves. In their world, deep feelings equal danger, because strong emotions lead to attachment, and attachment leads to potential loss, disappointment, or rejection. So when you begin to matter, they instinctively shut down some of their emotional reactions to avoid the possibility of getting hurt, even though shutting down hurts them too. What's important to understand is that this retreat is not a sign that their feelings disappeared, but a sign that those feelings grew stronger, and the stronger they grow, the more the avoidant fears losing control of them. When they distance themselves, it's often because they're trying to reduce the emotional intensity, bring themselves back to a place where they feel grounded, and return to the emotional quiet they're familiar with, even though a part of them actually wants the connection they're running from. Their silence, space, or sudden emotional shutdown is their attempt to regulate the internal chaos that love brings. Because love disrupts the numbness they use to function, and while you might see their withdrawal as coldness, inside they're fighting a battle between wanting to stay close to you and needing to protect themselves from the vulnerability closeness creates. In reality, the very fact that you've disrupted their numb zone is proof of the depth of their feelings, because avoidants don't get shaken by people who mean nothing. They don't lose emotional control over casual connections, and they don't pull away from situations that are unimportant to them. The distance you see is not the absence of emotion, it's the evidence that what they feel for you is real enough to break through their carefully constructed emotional defenses. When an avoidant comes back into your life after pulling away, it is almost never accidental, because avoidance Avoidants do not drift in and out of people's lives for no reason, and their return carries far more emotional meaning than their behavior may suggest on the surface, since every step toward you requires them to push past fears, defenses, and the internal voice telling them to stay safe by staying distant. Avoidants don't re-enter a connection unless something in them is genuinely drawn to you, because returning means facing the very emotions they tried to escape, and avoidants don't willingly put themselves back into situations that feel overwhelming unless the pull toward that person is stronger than their fear. When they come back, even quietly or subtly, it means they've been thinking about you during the silence, processing the connection in their own slow, private way, and realizing that staying away doesn't make their feelings disappear, it only makes the absence louder. Their return is a sign that the bond you share lingers in their mind even when they try to shut it down, and that the emotional distance they create never fully separates them from the connection they feel toward you. It takes emotional effort for an avoidant to re-engage, because they must confront the same vulnerability that scared them off in the first place, and choosing to step back toward you means that the connection mattered enough to outweigh the discomfort of opening up again. They might not return with dramatic words or clear explanations, but the fact that they show up at all is significant, because avoidants don't follow emotional impulses the way others do. They follow what feels safe, familiar, and meaningful, and coming back to you indicates that something about you provides a feeling they don't easily find elsewhere. Even if the return is small, a message, a subtle check-in, a quiet attempt to reconnect, it reflects a deeper truth. They missed you, they felt the void you left, and they couldn't fully detach no matter how hard they tried. Avoidants often process emotions internally rather than verbally, so their return isn't always accompanied by the clarity you might want. But it still represents a deliberate choice, because reaching out means they overcame the part of themselves that says closeness is dangerous. Their re-entry is a sign that the connection has emotional weight, that it lingered in their mind, that it created an imprint strong enough to pull them back even after fear pushed them away. They don't revisit situations that mean nothing to them, and they don't return to people who left no emotional mark, because avoidants protect themselves fiercely, and they don't voluntarily walk back into vulnerability without a powerful emotional reason. When they return, it means they feel a pull they can't ignore, a pull toward the comfort, understanding, or emotional resonance they found with you, something that felt safe enough or important enough that losing it felt worse than facing their own fear. Their return is not random, it is intentional, even if quiet, because avoidants measure every emotional step, and choosing to step toward you again is one of the clearest signs that their feelings for you were never temporary or shallow. Even if they struggle to express it, their act of coming back speaks loudly, because avoidants don't revisit a connection that didn't touch them deeply, and their return is one of the strongest confirmations that what they feel for you is real. When you take a step back and really look at everything, the distance, the inconsistency, the small gestures, the quiet vulnerability, the emotional overwhelm, and the way they always seem to find their way back, you start to see the truth that was hiding underneath all along. This avoidant loves you in a way that doesn't look like the movies, in a way that doesn't match the scripts you've been taught to expect, but in a way that is real, raw, and shaped by every wound they've carried through their life. Their love might not be loud, but it's sincere. It might not be steady, but it's genuine. It might not be simple, but it's deeply felt. And the fact that they struggle doesn't mean they don't care. It means they care more than they know how to handle. So don't let their fear make you doubt your worth, and don't let their silence make you question their heart. The connection you share is touching parts of them they never thought would wake up again. And even if they can't always show it clearly, what they feel for you is there, quiet, conflicted, and real. And sometimes love doesn't need to shout to be true. Sometimes it speaks in the struggle, the return, the moments of softness, and the courage it takes for them to keep trying in the only way they know how.